Hello, my name is Victoria Overbeck, and I will be presenting on my project titled Spatial and Social Connectedness of People Who Smoke Drugs with Tuberculosis in Rural South Africa. The primary mechanism of Mycobacterium tuberculosis infection is inhaling droplets containing bacilli aerosolized by an infectious tuberculosis case. In high-burden settings, including South Africa, non-household-based transmission accounts for a majority of tuberculosis infections. Locations within the built environment might contribute to the transmission of TB, either due to inadequate design or because they encourage social gatherings, like churches and bars. People who smoke illicit drugs are at increased risk of TB disease as a result of the physiologic effects of illicit drugs and the association between illicit drug use and other risk factors for TB. Despite there being a high prevalence of TB among people who smoke drugs, transmission dynamics have not yet been studied in this population. Studies have focused on the identification of social contact patterns related to general populations without describing or comparing patterns of contact in high-risk populations. Understanding the social contact patterns of people with TB may lead to the development of innovative community-based control interventions. Recent studies have shown that investigation methods may be more effective if they are not only person-oriented, like contact tracing, but also place-oriented, which involves identifying the places where infected individuals have been and investigating the potential for transmission in those locations. In order to identify high-risk locations for TB transmission, we need multidisciplinary approaches that incorporate microbiologic, geographic, and social network data. The objectives of my analysis are to describe the social contact patterns and mixing among this cohort and identify frequented locations where transmission to the larger community may be occurring. I also will explore the spatial architecture of substance use social networks. 76 participants were included in this analysis, all of whom were 15 years or older, had microbiologic TB confirmation, and screened urine positive for methamphetamine or methaqualone. These participants were recruited through respondent-driven sampling and from a TB clinic in Worcester, South Africa. Social contact questionnaires were administered to record locations and GPS coordinates frequented in the 1 to 2 years prior to TB diagnosis. For this analysis, I created non-directed social location networks of shared ties between people who smoke drugs with TB. For example, a person with TB who reported socializing at a specific bar could be linked in a social location network to another person with TB who reported socializing at that same bar. Shared ties were informed from name location types and confirmed with GPS coordinates. GPS coordinates for drug use locations were mapped to identify sites of spatial overlap, defined as locations within 100 meters of each other. This analysis was performed in an effort to identify shared or neighboring locations that might not be recognized by location name alone. Using these sites of overlap, I created non-directed substance use networks in the same manner as the social location networks. I then quantified sex, age, race, ethnicity, and HIV status assortative mixing within the social location and substance use location networks. Lastly, I classified participants into 2 groups based on where they report using drugs in the community. This table shows the potential locations of TB transmission for people who smoke drugs with TB that report a shared venue prior to TB diagnosis. From this table, we can see that a lot of participants report being incarcerated at the same holding cell and jail or prison and using drugs within 100 meters of other participants. There is less overlap with shops, malls, bars, and places of worship, but all are still greater than 10%. Overlap in places of worship appear to be among individuals of different age groups and different genders, whereas bars appear to be the location type where we see the most intermixing between different ethnicities. The proportion of overlap among people living with HIV appears to be roughly the same across all location types. This figure shows the social location networks of people who smoke drugs with TB. Each network node represents a participant, and each network edge represents a specific shared location, with edge colors indicating a unique venue by location type. Essentially, this is a visual depiction from the data I just showed in Table 1. For example, as we can see here, there are 3 different bars that connect various participants, 10 places of worship, 2 malls, 18 different shops, 3 holding cells, and 2 prisons. In regards to the assortativity coefficients for the social location networks, participants do not strongly prefer to connect with participants of the same sex, age, or HIV status nor do they strongly avoid such connections. However, individuals of the same race/ethnicity tended to be more connected to each other within the network. We observed some level of homophily or preference for nodes with similar degrees to form connections in the network. The figure on the left shows a map of some of the substance use locations reported by participants. Each black dot represents a location reported by a participant with buffer zones of 50 meters and 100 meters shown in yellow and blue, respectively, around each map location. This shows that participants are using drugs in very close proximity to one another and more than likely are using drugs with these other participants. The figure on the right shows the substance use location networks of people who smoke drugs with TB. Again, each network node represents a participant, and each network edge represents a drug use location named by a participant within 100 meters of another participant, and the node size indicates how many participants report using drugs within 100 meters of one another. In contrast to the social location network and the substance use location network, there was a tendency for individuals of different genders to connect more often. This suggests that sex may play a role in shaping the social ties and interactions among people who smoke drugs with TB in this cohort. Additionally, we observed an even stronger tendency for individuals of different HIV statuses to connect more often. Similar to the social location network, in this network, there was also the tendency for nodes with similar degrees to connect. Based on where participants report using drugs in the community, I defined two smoke drug use archetypes, the residentials and the travelers. Residentials include people who report using drugs in private settings, which may be at their own home, someone else's home, or a mixture of the two. Travelers, on the other hand, exhibit a versatile and mobile pattern of drug use, often seeking different experiences and social contexts for their consumption. This category encompasses people who report using drugs exclusively at public venues, those that use at their own home, someone else's home, as well as public venues, and those who report using drugs in numerous settings, but not their own residence. This table compares demographics and health characteristics between the two archetypes. Travelers with a median age of 42 were significantly older than residentials, with a median age of 35, indicating an age-related distinction in drug use archetypes. Residentials have a significantly higher prevalence of HIV compared to travelers, suggesting potential differences in health status and risk behaviors. None of the other variables shown in the table were statistically significant, despite there being some variation between the two archetypes. This figure shows the distance traveled from home location by location type as a way of quantifying the spatial mobility of this cohort. Participants tend to travel the furthest to access malls and shops while remaining close to their homes while using drugs. In conclusion, using social network and geographic data, we identified potential locations where TB transmission could be occurring among and from this high-risk population. Demographic trends, including gender distribution, mixed ancestry representation, and prevalence of HIV varied across venue types, highlighting the importance of tailored public health interventions based on specific social contexts. Most participants reported using drugs in private residential settings. Therefore, interventions that extend beyond public venues may be needed to effectively reach people who smoke drugs and interrupt TB transmission. Network-based analyses offer these insights into candidate locations for spatially targeted screening. I'd like to thank the total field team staff for their contribution to this project, as well as the Western Cape Department of Health for their continued support. Thank you for listening.